Okay, everybody, good morning. Welcome back again. There's still about 3.5 minutes, then we will get the review session started for today. That's the plan for today's meeting. But hope you guys had a great weekend and are feeling rested and recharged. So just hang in there for a few minutes and we will get our meeting underway in just, like I say, right at 8:30. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to class. Hey, Gabriel. Good morning. Hey, Brianna. Dan, how's it going? I wonder, have any of you guys signed up for these vaccines yet? Probably not, because many of you probably not in the eligible categories, but I would be curious to know if any of you have, since I just finally got my appointment scheduled, getting the first shot on Saturday and then the second one April the 3rd. So it's nice to be able to get vaccinated, I guess, and finally put this whole coronavirus thing behind me. Oh, nice. That's awesome, Brianna. Are you working one of the sectors that gives you eligibility, or did you just get lucky with like a spare dose? I wonder. That's good to know. Great. That's good, Gazi. Yeah, my old uncle, who's 83, he just got his shot, and he's kind of like a father figure to me, so I visited him this weekend. That was good news for us. Yeah, as a professor in the educator field, we have our eligibility, so it was actually very easy for me to sign up. I kind of felt silly that I didn't do it a few weeks prior, because once I got online on the website, myturn.california.gov, it took me like just a few minutes to get the appointment set. Nice. How you feeling, Roheen? Any side effects? I know that there's no serious side effects, and so everyone should get their vaccine, but I'm just curious, since I'm getting mine on Saturday, like, do you have any headaches, body aches, anything I need to know as we approach the weekend? Well, you're young and healthy, so you might not be that susceptible to those side effects, even if they do happen to some people. But when my 83-year-old uncle got it, I'm like, I can't delay. This guy's doing fine and didn't really have any side effects. Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. I'm seeing you guys here at the chat. Good morning. So yeah, it's 8:30. Today we have a pretty clear plan. Couple days, yeah. My friend's mom also just got a minor kind of cold symptoms, and they just went away pretty fast. So nice. Well, that's good to know. Anyway, guys, thanks again as usual for being here. And I was saying, I hope you had a good weekend. So this week you have your midterm coming up on Thursday. That's the next class. So we definitely have to today take our time to just go over the study guide. So let me make sure to check in with everybody and notify you if you haven't noticed it. Can anybody tell me that you've received the titanium message with the study guide on Saturday morning? Just want to confirm that first and foremost, and then from there we're going to use that study guide as the sort of map of today's meeting. But just let me know in the chat if you've. Okay, great. Thanks, AJ, and good morning, everybody. Like I say, all right. So pretty much, I'm going to walk us through this study guide, but I like student participation to be solid during review sessions. So for the most part, I would love it if you guys can contribute answers, information, and content in this live chat. And I'll do my best to, add information and detail, make sure everything's correct. If anything needs to be corrected, clarified, or explained, I'll do that. but I want us to go through as much as possible all the topics in that study guide so you're as prepared as you can be for the upcoming exam. All right, so I have my copy of it pulled up on my own laptop here. So I would ask that if you have your copy, you can pull it up on your own computer, or just you can follow the topics as I go through them in this class meeting and then compare it against the study guide later. But basically, it would be useful for you to have your study guide available while we go through these notes so that you can see the map of topics as we just proceed. Okay? So again, just a reminder, if I ask you guys questions about the things on the study guide, try your best to just supply the information, and once we get one, we move on to the next, and we'll try to be as fast as possible so that we can get through all these things. Okay? So a little bit of a time crunch, but that's fine. We're going to help each other out and get through it. So we're starting with the first topics in chapter 8, okay? And here's my first question. So let me know in the chat, what is a good critical thinker and what is a bad critical thinker? Tell me if you can define either of those things. So going back in your notes to the first day and in your memory, try and derive the answer from me. Tell me what the right information is. So what is a good critical thinker? And on the other hand, what is a bad critical thinker? So we'll just start this meeting with that question, and then we'll follow on from there throughout the remainder of the study guide. So this is the first question listed at the top of the study guide, and it takes us back to the beginning of class because they're all in kind of chronological order from the first meeting to the most recent meeting. So yeah, good critical thinker, bad critical thinker, just hit me with that answer, and I'll make sure to expand on anything that you say. Good morning, everybody. Hi, Alec, Alyssa, Grace, and all you others. Always nice to be with you. But let's get to work. What's a good critical thinker, or what is a bad critical thinker? Okay, Ryan, thank you. So a good critical thinker is a person that will not believe a claim unless it's based on good evidence. Yes. One additional thing, though, so let me add this. There's also the feature of when you're the one giving a claim to someone else. So like sometimes you're the recipient of other people's claims, and sometimes you're the sender of a claim to another person. So when you hear information as a good critical thinker, you won't believe it unless it's based on good evidence or arguments. And when you make claims to others, you also make sure that you can provide good evidence and arguments to back your claim up. And then the bad critical thinker is, let's see what you've written, Caleb. A bad critical thinker will believe claims that are not based on good evidence or arguments, yes. And also, they don't have the ability to provide good evidence or arguments to defend their own views. Okay, so that's it. A good critical thinker won't believe something without good evidence and arguments to support it. And when they make claims to others, they can provide good evidence and arguments to support their own views. Bad critical thinker is the opposite, a type of person that will believe claims that are not based on good evidence and arguments and lacks the ability to produce good evidence and arguments to defend the claims they make to others. Okay, so good and bad critical thinker, fundamental stage setting concept of the course. Now let's move on. I'm asking you next, what is an argument? And I'm asking about the formal definition of an argument as given in logic, not like people yelling at each other and getting into fights and breaking up, but rather what is an argument in the logical sense? So this is kind of a technical definition, but you should know it. It's a set of things, but what are those things and how many and what are they? So just that's my new question for you. What's an argument? Hi, Kayla. Good to see you. So just let me know. Notice that I'm not writing a ton of things on the board because this has all been lectured on before, but you can, of course, find a more detailed discussion of any item in the previous meetings in our video collection. So Yelka, an argument, a set of two or more sentences where one sentence is the conclusion and the rest are premises that support the conclusion. Yes, that's very well. So an argument is always a set of at least two sentences, but sometimes more. And within each argument, you have one conclusion, which is the statement that you're trying to prove to be true, and the premises are the sentences or statements that give evidence for the conclusion. Now, the next question on the study guide list, I guess I've kind of just now covered it in this summary because it asks, what are the parts of an argument? So I guess I won't burden you with asking that question again, but let's just be all clear on the same page. Parts of an argument, one part is the conclusion. There's one sentence that's at the bottom, which is the conclusion. That's what you're trying to prove. And then all the other parts are the premises. So one conclusion, one or more premises. And those premises, yes, they're evidence for the conclusion below it. Okay, so I have a new question. What is the definition of truth? What does it mean for a sentence to be true? That's something that we've talked about a few times. So let's just get that back out there into the live chat. What is the definition of truth? For a sentence to be true, what must be the situation then? When what a sentence says matches the facts of reality. Yes, that's correct. So would you say that it's true that I'm wearing a watch? It is true, because there it is. So I say it, but I'm not just saying it like with words. It's actually a real fact. If I say that I'm wearing a sweater right now, that's not a true statement. It's a statement, but it's not a statement of fact, because as the facts are here, I'm not wearing such a thing. So when people say or write things, they could be true or they could be false, but what makes the difference is whether they match or mirror reality. So true sentences are statements that do match the reality. Like if I told you I was born in the 80s, that's true. I don't know, I keep using examples that have to do with me, but it's not necessarily about me, it's just any fact, right? Like the Statue of Liberty exists, that's just true, and it's just a fact because it's there. If I say to you that pigs can fly, that's not true because there's no real fact in the world that corresponds to that statement. So when you make a statement, it's true if it matches reality. Okay, now what's the definition of belief? That's the next question. It's kind of, it's related in a way to the word truth, but belief has to do with what a person thinks. So tell me, what does it mean when someone believes a sentence? To believe a sentence means what? When you think the sentence is true. Yes, that's correct, Nicole. So if you think the sentence is true, you believe it. People don't always have the same beliefs, but there's still just one set of facts. So one person can believe that aliens exist in outer space. Another person could say, you know what, I really don't think that's true. So no, I don't believe that. God created us in his image, there's no aliens or something like that. You know, so two people can have their different views, different beliefs, but there's only one answer, whether there's such a thing or not. There can't both be and not be. So beliefs are kind of up to you. They're your beliefs. They're your thoughts about what's true. But then the facts are the facts. And sometimes your beliefs are not in line with the facts. So people can have false beliefs. But hopefully when you're a good critical thinker, you figure things out, you get facts clear, and your beliefs are mostly true. Okay, so then next thing, when you have an argument and you reach the conclusion, there are words that are given which are called conclusion indicator words. So anyone can let me know in this chat, what are some of the most well-known conclusion indicator words? For example, you say or write this word just before the conclusion is provided in the argument. So this kind of is like a word that is a word of summary that tells you, now here comes the conclusion. So what are such words? All right, that's good, Yelka. One is therefore. Therefore is probably the most often used. There's also hence. There's thus. Okay, so those are all good examples. Like, for example, someone could say, I have a high fever, I cannot taste food, therefore I have COVID-19, or hence I have COVID-19, right? They're reaching a conclusion based on the symptoms that they're exhibiting. So that's like, that's the kind of logical judgment that they have based on those findings, right? So anyway, so is another one, ergo is another one, very good, yes. So those are all examples, you guys can see them in the chat. Therefore, thus, hence, so, ergo, in conclusion, consequently, it follows that, and so forth, right? Well, not the word so forth, okay? That's the use mention distinction. So I was using the word so forth there, not mentioning it. Okay, so anyway, premise indicator words, that's next. What are certain words that give the sense that now you're providing one of the evidence statements for an argument? So these kind of words indicate that the following content is evidence that supports something else. So what words are those? Like, you can tell me those. Premise indicator words. So like, because, that's right, that's a very well-known one. Since, or due to the fact that. You could also have given that. So like, for example, in the COVID example I just mentioned, someone might say, a doctor might tell you, well, let's not go with the doctor because we're just going off symptoms that a person might self-diagnose. So you could say, since I cannot taste food, and because I'm having a hard time catching my breath, therefore I may have COVID-19. You could also say for the reason that or on account of. Those are also good examples, yes. Since my package is missing, and since there are footsteps in the snow leading up to my doorstep, it follows that my package was stolen. So a person may derive that conclusion from the available evidence in another possible example. Okay, so very good. Yeah, since, because, due to the fact that, given that, on account of, etc. Those are all good examples. So then I'm asking to ask a little bit about different types of sentences. What is an imperative sentence? What type of sentence is an imperative? Just it's a word of classification for a certain type of sentences. What group of sentences are imperatives, if you could tell me that? So imperatives, anyone? What do you think? Give me an imperative. Right now, give me an imperative. They're commands, yes. Even if I say, write down an imperative right now, that is an imperative. It's kind of like a little meta example. But anyway, yes, commands of all kinds. Write this down, get out of the car, drop the weapon, hold the door, wait for me. Whatever the case may be, in whatever circumstance that a command could be given, the word that refers to those are imperatives in language. Okay, so next up, what's an interrogative? Different type of sentence. Interrogatives are not commands. But what are they, though? What's an interrogative? What is it? Question mark. Do you know what an interrogative is? It's a question, yes. So even the question, what is an interrogative, is an interrogative. But anyways, yeah, so it's questions of all types. Any statement, well, not statement, but any sentence that ends with a question mark is in that category. Where's the bathroom? What day is it? Where am I? What's my name? Who knows? Anyone can ask a question. Whenever you do, the technical term for that is it's an interrogative. Okay, now what is an assertoric sentence? That's very fundamental and important to logic and conversation. So what's an assertoric sentence? Maybe we can say this. Assertoric sentence. What do you think? Just hanging in there for a minute, giving you a second. Okay, good, Ashley. So it is a sentence that is either true or false, right? They say they are sentences which have a truth value. They're called assertoric sentences because they are assertions. They're claims, and these are claims that can be compared to reality and be determined as either true or false. So if I assert that Sacramento is the capital of California, I give a statement that is true. If I say that Paris is the capital of California, this is false, but they're both assertions, and so they do have a truth value. Those are the type of sentences that are used as premises and conclusions of arguments, so they're of great importance to logic and critical thinking. Okay, so here's a question that I'm just telling you I will ask this question or something like this question about this question. So if you want to know something that definitely will be on the test, I'm telling you just straight up, I'm going to ask about deductive validity. It's so important to logic that it has to be emphasized. So let's kind of ask this again. What is a deductively valid argument? What is the definition of a deductively valid argument? And then we'll talk about it a little bit, but I want to see if you can notify me what is a deductively valid argument. Okay, so Yelke, an argument where if the premises are true, then the conclusion must also be true. Correct. Also, Nicole, correct. If all the premises are true, then the conclusion must also be true. It has to be worded in this precise way. The words if and then appear in the definition of deductive validity. So you're not supposed to write down all the premises are true, so the conclusion must be true. That would be incorrect because when you have a valid argument, we are not saying that the premises are true. We are saying that in case they are true, then in that case, the conclusion would have to be true. Because obviously you can have valid arguments that are not sound. And when it is valid but not sound, that means that not every premise is actually true. So anyway, if the premises are all true, then the conclusion must be true as well. And we're going to get to examples in just a moment, so hold those thoughts. But next question is this. What is a sound argument? What's a sound argument? So valid is an argument where if all the premises are true, then the conclusion must be as true as well. What does it mean when it is sound? Definition of soundness, that's next. So a sound argument means what? This is just, the information that you got to know. So Yelka, it is a deductive argument that is valid and that has all true premises. Correct. So two things have to be there for it to be sound. Number one, it has to be valid in form. But beyond that, it actually does have to have all true premises. So if you have a valid argument where some of the premises are out of line with reality, then it's not sound. It can still be valid, though, if the conclusion is a logical consequence of the premises. So now let's try and get a few examples out there. Can anybody give me an example of an argument that is valid but not sound? Valid but not sound. So produce an example if you can. Maybe just write the premises with numbering so that we can see which ones are which, like number one, number two, and then the premise following that statement. So please, if you can, write out an example of an argument which is valid but it isn't sound. Just seeing what you have in mind, and then we'll go over it. So let me say this, okay? One easy way to generate such an example is to begin the argument with a false statement that says the word all. Like if you say all men are tall or all men have short hair or something like that, that's clearly false. But once you've said it, then it's easy to follow it through to the logical conclusion. So AJ, good. All humans can fly. No, they can't, but let's assume that they could. All humans can fly. Second premise, LeBron James, I'm assuming, is a human, and therefore LeBron James can fly. Correct. That's a valid argument. And why is it not sound? Because of the first premise, which has the false information that all humans can fly. But if you just look at the logic of the statements, the conclusion of that argument does follow from the premises listed. So that's a good one. Now, Ashley, all humans have blue skin. Tom Holland isn't human, therefore he has blue skin. Another good example. All men love cake. Your dad is a man and your dad loves cake. He doesn't. Haha, that's funny. Yeah. So I guess, do you like cake? And you guys have kind of a little bit of a disagreement on that. I don't know. I'm kind of neutral with cake. It depends on the quality and which kind of flavor it is. I'm more of a pie person, but cake can be good. Anyways, yes. So those are good examples all around. Natalie, you're saying all humans are elephants. Okay. All men are human and therefore all men are elephants. Well, this is a very highly unusual example. I mean, the first premise, it's almost strains the ability of the mind to comprehend the statement. If humans are elephants, then they're not humans. But anyway, yeah, logically speaking, yes, this is valid but not sound, and even more unconventional than some of the other examples given there. But humans having blue skin, like the Smurfs, I guess, also pretty weird. But good, that's the kind of genre of valid but not sound argument. Okay, so that reminds you that you can have validity just based on logic. If you even ignore the content and whether they're true or false, you can still see the logical connection between the conclusion and those premises. Okay, so now I'd like an example of a sound argument. Can anyone give me one of those? Sound argument. So you've given me some good examples of valid but not sound. So for sound, I mean, the thing is you just have to give a similar type of example, but just make sure that all the premises are actually like real facts. So, sometimes statements of formal classification that are true, like all men have two parents, or all fish can swim, I don't know, stuff like that, which begins with a true claim, can easily be filled out in a way that makes it sound. So let's see, who got an example? Just hanging in there for a few moments. But don't leave me hanging too long, let me know. What is an example of a valid argument that is sound? Okay, so Nicole, Cal State Fullerton is in CSUF is in Fullerton, yes. Fullerton is in California, and therefore Cal State Fullerton is in California. Very good. It's like one thing is contained within something else. That other thing is contained within an even bigger container. So the first thing is in the even larger container that subsumes the others. All mammals breathe air, Yelka says, and dolphins are mammals, and therefore dolphins breathe air. Yes. I mean, it's interesting. They're aquatic mammals, so they breathe air, but they're underwater a lot too. But yeah, I mean, obviously they need oxygen of some kind to survive, and that's a good example. Yeah, nice examples all around. Let me think. All U.S. presidents must be over 35. Joe Biden is the U.S. president, so therefore he's over 35. So anything like along those lines where you have a formally valid argument, but the statements that fill in the premises are facts, they're real facts. Okay, so good guys, so let's talk about the next question. What is an inductively strong argument? Can anyone tell me what it means for it to be inductively strong? And if you like, you could also give me an example. So definition and example of inductively strong. What do you think? So inductively strong argument. This is a little different than deductively valid. We still have the words if then in the stated definition, but there's something different about the relation of the conclusion to the premises. That's for you to tell me. What is an inductively strong argument? Okay, good, Ashley. So if all the premises are true, then the conclusion is likely to be true, probably true, but not, as we say with deductive validity, must be true. So with an inductively strong argument, the conclusion is not totally guaranteed, but it's likelier than not, given the premises. Okay, so who can hit me with a quick example of an inductively strong argument? Essentially, you just have to give information in the premises which establishes that this conclusion is probable. So what could be an example along those lines? We've worked with different types of examples. Sometimes they're standard, sometimes they're a little bit creative. So whatever you have of an inductively strong argument example. So like the format is usually along the lines of like, here's something that has happened over a certain course of time in a certain way. And then the conclusion is just, therefore, in the next example of this thing happening, it will happen again. But I need you to kind of give me the proper example so that we can work with it and talk about it. You must not passively wait for someone else to speak or write. You must take the initiative and start typing in that chat so that we can continue through the study guide. Okay, Alyssa. Every morning your mom wakes up and makes coffee, therefore she'll wake up and make coffee tomorrow. I like the example, but I would just add one thing to make it perfect. And that is, if you could state the duration or length of time that this pattern has existed going back in the past. Because if you just say every morning, it sounds like eternal, like every morning for eternity. And it also sounds categorical. So instead, you should say something like every morning for the past, however many years, she has done this, and therefore she'll do it tomorrow. So just being specific sometimes about the length of time is a key to a perfect type of response. Nicole, the sun has come up every morning for billions of years. Yes, it has, and therefore it will come up tomorrow. Are you sure? Well, we hope so, and we think probably yes, just because this is a long-standing pattern in nature. So that's a good example. Ashley, it's rained every year for billions of years. Everywhere, somewhere on the planet Earth, that could be a helpful point to add. But anyway, therefore it will rain next year. Good. I mean, there are places in the world, though, where it doesn't rain. So that's kind of why I would be a little more precise. If you go to Death Valley or something, I don't know when the last time they got rain was or what the actual fact is. The weather app has been accurate for the past week, and therefore the weather app will be accurate tomorrow. That's pretty good. Although I would say 1 week of time, you could have extended the range of time to make the conclusion seem even more powerful and more likely. 1 week is not as perhaps much to go on as like a month or a year or something. But all right, guys, so we seem to understand that's inductive strength. If If I hear the birds chirping every morning over the past 10 years outside my window in the morning, then I think there'll be birds chirping tomorrow. You know, it seems reasonable, but you can't be guaranteeing it logically. Okay, well, Violetta, my brother goes to the gym in the afternoon every day for the past 5 years. Is that true? If that's true, he's got a great regimen, and that's very nice. But you say then he'll go to the gym in the afternoon tomorrow. Probably he will, right? If he's got that kind of long-standing habit and track record. I wouldn't use habit. Habit has a bad connotation, right? Because it sounds like an addiction. Rather, he's got a solid routine and regimen. Once again, we're thinking about how language can shape a person's views. But anyway, good job. So let's go ahead into the next couple questions. On the other hand, there can sometimes be inductively weak arguments, just to note that. When you have an inductively weak argument, it means that the premises don't even give probable support to the conclusion. Like the last person that I talked to, their name was John, so the next person that I talk to on the street, their name will be John. There's no reason to think that this is like a pattern that's going to repeat. So, you know, that would be a pretty poor inductive argument. The evidence given in the inductive premises doesn't establish with any degree of likelihood the conclusion. Okay, so next I'm asking this, what's a disjunctive syllogism? First, yeah, just tell me give me an example of a disjunctive syllogism. And then after you do that, I'm gonna quickly write the format on the board so that everyone's clear about it. But we're, I think, pretty familiar with these types of deductively valid argument forms. There are 4 of them. That's what we're gonna go over right now. So what is a disjunctive syllogism, if anyone could write one out? It's also called an argument from elimination, everybody. Keep that in mind. There's 2 names for it, basically. There's argument from elimination, AKA disjunctive syllogism. Okay, so Yelka, my friends are either in the movie theater or at the food court. They're not at the movie theater, therefore they must be at the food court. Okay, good example. You know, so that's right. And to back that up a little and add detail, disjunctive syllogism always has this given structure. Either A or B, that's called a disjunction. It's an either or statement. Afterwards, the second premise eliminates one of those disjuncts. So for example, not A. If this is the 2 premises, what's the conclusion? B. So from the fact that either A or B and not A, therefore we conclude that B. Let's see. The father is either Smith or Jones, but a paternity test eliminated Smith, so Jones is the father. You know, I mean, suppose this woman has only had relations with 2 people that could possibly be, and we know it's either one or the other, but one has been eliminated through a DNA analysis, and so it must be the other. You kind of understand, like that's how disjunctive syllogism works. You have 2 cases, one or the other. One has been somehow eliminated or ruled out, and so the alternative to it must be the case. If we had negated the other disjunct, B, then we would have a separate type of example, and the conclusion then would be A. So that's all right. Caleb, he will either turn left or right. He did not turn right, therefore he turned left. You know, fair enough. I guess if he's turning his car, then there's only 2 directions that he could have turned. One has been ruled out, then he went the other way. Okay. Yeah, so disjunctive syllogism, this is the form that it has, and when you write an example of this form, you just plug in information for A and B the way you guys have done here in the chat. Okay, now Nicole, you say that a disjunctive syllogism is an either-or statement. Well, not exactly. A disjunction is an either-or sentence, and this is a disjunction. But a disjunctive syllogism is a full argument which does contain a disjunction within it. So just a slight terminological clarification, right? Disjunction is one type of sentence that is in the larger type of argument that is called disjunctive syllogism. Because a syllogism is like a 2-premise valid argument form, and that's what this is. Okay, so that's disjunctive syllogism. Next question, what's modus ponens? Someone tell me an example of a modus ponens argument here in this chat. So go ahead, let's find out what could be a modus ponens example. Modus ponens, anybody? What is it? We know it's one of the 3 hypothetical syllogisms. There are 3 members of the hypothetical syllogism family: modus ponens, modus tollens, and the chain argument. Each of them make use of a kind of sentence called a hypothetical, but you have to give me a little detail, though, about how it is that a modus ponens argument actually goes. So let's get it out there. What is a modus ponens example? Okay, Yelka, if you cheat on me, I will break up with you. Cheated on me, therefore I'm breaking up with you. I see that you used an example much similar to the one from the previous homework exercises, but that's fair. That's a good example, yes. Nicole, if I go on a run, then I will sweat. You did run, and therefore you sweated. Okay, good. Also, though, borrowing, again, from an example I've mentioned, anyone have something original? I mean, these are fine examples, and they work, and they receive full credit, but just to make sure that you can apply the concept in your own. That's good, though. While you're thinking of more, let me just write up here. By the way, when you number these things, guys, like Yelka and Nicole, you're numbering the number 3. Don't number 3, because 3 is the conclusion. You should only number the premises, because the conclusion being numbered makes it seem as though it's in the same series, but it's a separate thing. The premises are divided from the conclusion. So same to you, Ashley. Just know, if you wanted, you could put the letter C instead of the number 3 before the stated conclusion. Anyway, if I go shopping, then I'll have no money. You did go shopping, and therefore you have no money. Okay, so you really went off at the mall. That's fine. So those are good examples. Now let me write the format here of modus ponens. Modus ponens format is like this. You have 2 premises, then the conclusion. The first premise says if A, then B. That's a hypothetical, sometimes called a conditional. Second premise, A. And so therefore the conclusion is B. So in all your examples, this is the form that you're giving. If I go shopping, A, then I will, you say have no money. I did go shopping. That's the second premise. And therefore, conclusion, I have no money. Roxana, if I eat healthy, I'll be happy. I ate healthy, and therefore you're happy. Good. Ghazi, if I buy the new iPhone, then I will not buy a Mac, like a MacBook, right? I bought a new iPhone, therefore I did not buy a Mac. Yeah, it's hard to get them both. They're pretty expensive items. Alicia, if I drink coffee, I'll get energy, and you drink it, and therefore you'll be getting energy. Good. So you guys are good to go, it seems like, at least in these examples, for what modus ponens is. Okay, so next I'm asking modus tollens. Let me see if we can get that out there. Modus tollens argument, the next question for you. So how does a modus tollens argument look on the page or on the screen? Modus tollens, I mean, once again, it's got that, it's a hypothetical syllogism, so it does contain 2 premises and a conclusion. But fill me in about what the premises could be, give an example, and then we'll just close that discussion. You could even take some of your modus ponens examples and change the second premise and conclusion, and then that would be a modus tollens if you did that, but it's up to you. Let's see what you have. Not all at once, but do let me know. What do you got? Modus tollens. Okay, good, Grace. So you're telling me if I go to the store, I need to get gas. Don't need to get gas, and therefore I don't go to the store. Okay, good. Ashley, if I go shopping, then I'll have no money, but you do have money, and therefore you didn't go shopping. Okay, good. So you kind of just flipped the previous example by negating the consequent, and that's the right form. Those are both good examples. Let's see, Alyssa, if that song comes on, I will dance. You didn't dance, and therefore that song didn't come on. Okay, good. Yeah, one of those TikTok sort of viral videos or whatever. Caleb, if I go to the grocery store, then I'll get milk. I didn't get milk, therefore I didn't go to the grocery store. Okay, good. Yeah. So you guys, that's all right. Here's the form that you're giving examples of. It's if A, then B. Now, the second premise of modus tollens is the denial of the consequent, not B. So therefore, not A is the conclusion. Sometimes people get confused when they write modus tollens and they mix this part up, like they negate A on the second premise and then negate the conclusion on the conclusion, the consequent on the conclusion line, but that's incorrect. It has to be of this form, and that's what you guys have given me in the chat. So keep that in mind, and that's good. Next, let's talk about the chain argument. So who can run off a quick example of a chain argument example? That's the next and last argument form that we have to remember from old chapter 8. So chain argument is next. So to the chain argument, One more question about these types of arguments. How does it go? How does the chain argument go? Okay, so Yelka, you're telling me if I don't work, I won't be able to save money. Second premise, if I don't save money, I won't be able to see BTS in concert. Huh. And so therefore, conclusion, if I don't work, I will not be able to see BTS in concert. Yes, that's a good example. Notice that every statement is an if-then. Each sentence is a hypothetical or a conditional. So your first premise is of the form if A, then B. The second premise takes the consequent of the prior premise and makes it the new antecedent. So if B, then C. And then the conclusion that you wrote combines the first antecedent from premise 1 with the final consequent of premise 2, and that says if A, then C. So chain argument. If something A, then in that case, B follows from it. And if B occurs, then something C follows from it. So finally, therefore, if A, then ultimately, through this chain of events, C. Okay? I don't know, like if I don't wear a mask, I'll get the coronavirus. If I get the coronavirus, then I will be hospitalized. So if I don't wear a mask, then I will be hospitalized. Gabriel, if I run, I will be healthy. If I'm healthy, I will look good. So if I run, then I will look good. Yes, a good example as well. We hope that running makes you look good. Try to stay healthy with exercise and fitness. So that's always to everyone's benefit. Good. So thank you guys for those examples. Now, the last thing from Chapter 8 is what is the standard form of an argument? Like, how are you supposed to write an argument and display it visually on the page? Tell me what is standard form. Well, I mean, I'll just tell you. Standard form is like this. You have to have the premises listed out and separate from each other. They cannot run along on one continuous line like you're just writing a paragraph in a normal format. When one sentence, which premises are sentences, right? So when one of them ends, like period, we jump to the next available ledger line below. That's like hitting the return key and jumping to the next one, not allowing it to continue to the right on the same available horizontal line. So, you have all the premises separate, and the conclusion is at the bottom. There's a horizontal line that separates the set of premises from the conclusion. Okay, so that's standard form. Keep writing arguments in standard form when you are asked to give examples and stuff in tests and quizzes. Alicia, if I finish my homework, then I'll have the weekend free. If I have the weekend free, then I'll get to hang out with my friends. And so therefore, if I finish my homework, then I'll be able to hang out with friends. Very good. Okay, thanks for the examples, everybody. Now I'm just going to kind of run through some of the stuff in Chapter 1, all right, all you guys. So there's questions at the beginning here about the two famous social psychology experiments that we studied. Milgram experiment, what's that? That's the one that involved the false electric shocks. Subjects were recruited and put into the role of teacher and learner. Teacher was asked to give shocks to the learner when they got a memorization question wrong. And every time they got another one wrong, they were supposed to give a more powerful shock. In fact, these were not really given as shocks, but the teacher thought that they were real. And the question was, how far will people go following authority figures, even when they're asking you to do things that are clearly bad and wrong? And in the end, 2/3 of the subjects did give all the shocks. So it shows us that people have a tendency to behave that way, and critical thinking can help give you the tools to resist authority. The second question, the Zimbardo or Stanford Prison Experiment, what is that? Well, the U.S. Navy in 1971 funded a study of the conditions of prison life to see whether there was something about that kind of social scenario and power dynamic that caused people to be abusive. So student volunteers were divided into the role of prisoner and guard. It was supposed to be run as a simulated prison for 2 weeks. After only 6 days, it was discontinued because of the evident abuse and trauma that was being conducted by the guards toward the prisoners. So again, it shows us that given social support and loose oversight guidelines, many people will behave badly and devolve into savage and inhumane treatment of others. The critical thinking, again, helps give you the tools that you need to think about what you're doing and whether it's ethical or rational. Okay, now, 3 stages of cognitive development. Who remembers those? Just give me the words and I can maybe expand on what they are. But in cognitive development, which is the lifelong process of developing intelligence and problem-solving ability, William Perry Jr. said there were 3 overall phases or stages of that. And it goes from blank to blank to blank. So what were those 3 stages, if you could recall? of cognitive development. Okay, good, Dan. There's dualism, relativism, and commitment. And just a few words about each point. Dualism, the first stage, that's when you think that truth is all just black and white and it's totally known by authority figures, so all you should do is listen to them, defer to them, and receive their information from on high. So dualism thinks that truth is all black and white and authority figures know everything. So you just don't have to think for yourself, just listen to the authority figures. The second stage, relativism, is when you think that truth is all just personal opinion. And so there's actually no objective facts or truth. It's all just personal opinions. And then, so everyone should have equal respect for all these different opinions and not judge them. Finally, though, the third level, commitment, that's when you realize that even experts can disagree. And you also realize that not everyone has the same kind of evidence for their opinions. So instead, you commit to your own views based on reason and the best available evidence. And unlike the dualist, you do think that you can find out the answers, not just others telling you. But unlike the relativist, you do think that these conclusions that you reach are objectively true and not just relative to yourself. Okay, so next, confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is a bias that somebody has when they only seek out information that reinforces what they already believe. So it's basically like a biased way of seeking facts and information, only looking at the side that is supportive of what you already think is true, and not basically taking a look at the other side or the counter argument. So like, I mean, if a person thought that, I don't know, like healing crystals were real and they actually had, you know, healing properties, like kind of a new age belief, then they would never ever look at like peer-reviewed research that shows that there's no such kind of measurable properties. They would only look at like views and ideas written by the community of supporters that affirm these claims. So anyway, confirmation bias is a big problem in our world because with the internet, everyone can kind of find information to support almost any position that anyone has. Prior to the internet, we would have had more central control over the dissemination of information. So you wouldn't have had the resources to go and like stand up a belief in all kinds of weird and wild ideas. That's why good critical thinking is important, even more than ever, because now you have to kind of monitor and judge on your own what the reliable and unreliable sources are. Okay, so next, qualities of a good critical thinker. Now this question, I kind of condensed a whole bunch of vocabulary items down into one topic, so we got to unpack some stuff. But brief definition of each point. So analytical skill, that's the ability to provide logical support for your beliefs instead of just having no basis at all. Effective communication, the ability to speak well, write well, listen carefully, and having awareness of different communication styles. Inquiry skills, knowing how to find information, collect it, compile it, and present it for the purposes of research. Flexibility, the ability to change a person's mind or the ability to change your own mind or plans, and having the open mind to consider alternative ideas of other people. Open-minded skepticism. So that is, on the one hand, skepticism. So you would not believe something unless it could be proven beyond reasonable doubt, but open-minded enough to keep an open mind to all different views until such proof arrives, if it ever does. The method of doubt. This was an idea discussed by the famous French philosopher René Descartes, who lived from 1596 to 1650. And the method of doubt, he says, we should use it to determine what is totally certain. What it says to do is to assume that something is false if it could even possibly be doubted. So rule out and just disregard all things that could even conceivably be false and see what is left over, and whatever remains is the certainty that we're looking for. According to the method of doubt of Descartes, all the things that we ever perceive with our five senses, that we see, taste, touch, hear, and smell, are all subject to doubt, because I guess we could all be in a simulation or dreaming or something. But the one thing that cannot be doubted based on that method is the knowledge that you yourself exist, at least as a disembodied mind, because I think, therefore I am. The very fact that you're thinking anything establishes conclusively that at least you exist, even if maybe everything else is just a dream. But anyway, method of doubt, assume things are false unless they can be proven, and assume things are false if there's any chance they could be doubted. Okay, collaborative learning. That is just being able to work well with other people to find shared solutions to common problems instead of doing everything unilaterally and rejecting the advice or the input of others. And then one more quality of a good critical thinker is creative problem solving. The ability to come up with imaginative solutions to complex problems. Sometimes that involves having advanced contingency plans developed in case things go wrong. And in other cases, it involves just having the ability to quickly assess the situation and determine the right strategy to solve a problem on the fly. Okay, why is critical thinking important for being a citizen in a democracy? Well, the main thing is because in a democracy we have elections and the people determine who holds power through the voting process. So if we are called on as citizens to participate in the electoral outcomes of democracy, then being a good critical thinker will help us in that, because we'll be more well-informed, knowledgeable of the different arguments and literature, and we can cast wise votes then. So democracy is all about voting in elections. I noticed that sometimes on the quiz, most people mention that, but in a few cases, people said just general stuff that you could say about any system, like helps people have smart conversations and have a meeting of the minds and listening to others. Whether it's democracy or monarchy or anything else, I mean, those would hold, but in an actual democracy, we vote. So that's when critical thinking really bears an important role. Okay, so next, how could critical thinking benefit you in terms of making a rational life plan and self-esteem? Good critical thinkers, studies show, higher reported degrees of self-confidence, lower level of rage, anger, and depression, anxiety. So, mental health and mental wellness is a big deal. If you want to have that, one tool that you can add to your toolkit is to just try and improve on your critical thinking and argumentative ability. It also helps you to make clear plans for your life. So critical thinkers are good planners. They can determine what their goals are and what all the little steps are along the way to get there. If you're a good critical thinker, you don't just have some big overarching goal, get rich, and you just don't know how to do it. You might have that as your goal, but you know all the little steps that are taken to get there and what are the best methods to their achievement. Okay, so next is the three-step model of critical thinking. What are the 3 steps in the critical thinking process? You have experience, interpretation, and analysis. Don't confuse the 3 stages of the critical thinking process with the 3 stages of cognitive development. That's one error that some students did make on the quiz, but it's understandable because they're both 3-part processes and you can kind of mix them up in your mind. But keep them separate. The critical thinking process is something that you bring to a given, it's episodic, like one particular event. Cognitive development happens over the course of a whole lifetime. But anyway, what's the first stage, experience? If anyone could just tell me that. What's the experience stage of critical thinking? When you do what? Just checking in with you. Yeah, experience, I know, but I'm saying what is the definition of it? The question itself names it as the first stage, but I'm asking though, what is the experience stage definition? First-hand experience, information, or facts we receive from sources. This is more about description. Right, well, that's one way to put it. Kind of a verbatim statement taken from the text, but out of context a little bit. It's when you just try to give an explanation as to why or how an event, sorry, I'm getting it wrong. That's interpretation, which comes next. Thank you, backing up. Experience, when you simply describe what the experience was, what it was. So it is the what of the experience. When you just say what happened, before you try to explain why or how. Okay, so you just describe what the experience or event was without yet trying to understand why or how it happened, correct? You could say, for example, I lost my job, and that's just what happened. But at that first stage, you're not going further and trying to figure out, why though did I lose the job? What were the factors that led to that event? It could also be something that just happens in the world if it doesn't have to do with you specifically. Like you could say, Trump won the election in 2016 over Clinton. I know he lost the 2020 election, but like just going back a bit, you might say that's an event that happened, or you could talk about the 2020 election where he did lose. The second stage, though, is interpretation, okay? And that is when you go forward and try to give that explanation as to why or how. So in the case of losing your job, you might start by thinking, I don't know, they don't like people who look like me, or they don't like people who dress like me, or something like that. Or in the case of the election outcome, you could say, oh, Trump won in 2016 because of the Midwestern region having economic anxiety, working class. Or you could say it was because of racial hostility towards immigrants. But when you get to the third stage, that's the interpretation stage. The analysis stage, getting my words mixed up. Let me say it clearly. Experience, interpretation, analysis. The experience stage, you simply describe what happened. The interpretation stage, you go further and try and explain why or how it happened. Now at the analysis stage, you go back to the previous interpretation and you try and consider whether or not it was correct, or is there a better, more well-suited interpretation. So the problem with your initial interpretation is that sometimes it's formed hastily or in the heat of the moment or due to emotional factors. So you owe it to yourself to return to the case later and reconsider. So like in the case where you lost your job and you're blaming everyone else, you might think twice about it and then understand that you did perform poorly on certain tasks at the workplace. Or in the case of an election, your first instinct might be that it was due to economic anxiety, but as you reflect on it further and you see that the economy is strong, you think it has more to do with racial hostility. I don't know. So whatever the case is, a critical thinker doesn't just want to have stuff happen and not have any understanding of why. We want to be able to come up with the explanation as to why, so that when good things happen, we can repeat them, and when bad things happen, we can avoid them in the future. Okay, so experience, interpretation, analysis, not to be confused with dualism, relativism, and commitment. Okay, so thank you guys. So next, what are obstacles to critical thinking? There's a random assortment of those that we mentioned in the book. So quickly, avoidance. That's when you just avoid people or ideas that differ from your own views. You should not do that. You should be willing to engage with people. What's the worst that can happen if you just have a meeting of the minds with a person of a different opinion? You might learn something about what they think, where they're coming from. Doesn't mean that you're having your mind changed, but you might have your mind changed in some cases if you hear a better argument. So let's not seek to avoid each other when we don't agree on stuff. We have to build bridges, and we have to remember that we have more in common than that. Okay, anger, that's when you have a negative emotional reaction of hostility towards the presentation of alternative ideas or opinions. There's no need to get mad at people when they just don't agree with you on stuff. I mean, words, isn't there a saying like sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me? So when people don't agree and they express a contrary opinion, that's not a time for you to get mad. It's a time for you to try and understand where they're coming from. And if you don't agree, you can make a counter argument. You can say reasonably and in a calm and measured way, I don't agree, and here are the reasons that I find fault with your position. But that doesn't mean that you have to insult people, raise your voice, etc. Anger, in fact, undermines the credibility of your own position because it makes it seem that you don't have any real evidence and that you have to just resort to an emotional display. Okay, cliches, what are these? These are overused common sayings or phrases. Oftentimes they're little one-liners. And what they try to do is to stop critical discussion or debate. Think of expressions like it is what it is, to each their own, whatever, and all of those kind of examples. When someone drops a cliche of that kind, they want to basically exit from the continuing discussion and seek no further comment. Sometimes that's reasonable if you've exhausted the conversation, but I find that people often use cliches too frequently, and after a while that gets you into a habit of never having any kind of in-depth discussion that goes beneath the surface. Okay, denial, simply denying alternative views without even considering them first. You're supposed to consider evidence and information and then make judgments, not deny things before you've even looked at the facts. If a person was on a jury and they just denied that this person was innocent, even if there was credible evidence given to them, then that would be an unfair and biased judgment. So in real life or in court or wherever, you should just wait until you see evidence and facts before you come to conclusions. But if you deny things before you even looked at the information, then you can't do that. Ignorance is when you choose to stay uninformed about a topic so that you don't have to make a choice or decision. Like saying, I don't know anything about the science of climate change, so I'm not going to tell you whether I believe in it or not. The problem is that, especially now with the internet, everyone has access to the same information if they just want to find it. So let's try to make sure that we're well informed. Don't seek to avoid information so that you can have a lame excuse to just not take positions or actions in life. Conformity. That is when you adopt a view that you think is popular or in the majority, just to fit in and so that you don't stand out or get excluded. We all want to fit in. We all want to be part of groups. There are powerful psychological and social imperatives that incline us to do that. But you still want to be the independent, unique person that you are and think for yourself. Sometimes you'll just agree with the majority, and that's fine. But when you do, it should be based on your own powers of judgment and not just to fit in. Because sometimes the majority can be wrong, and we've seen that in history. So you should think through things on your own and make your own conclusions from there. Struggling, one more barrier or obstacle to critical thinking. Struggling is when you endlessly debate what position or action to take, and you never ever reach a conclusion. I'm reminded of the classic literature of Shakespeare, the play Hamlet. If you know a little bit about the plot, Hamlet is endlessly debating throughout the whole play whether he should take vengeance on his uncle, who basically killed his father and usurped the throne. And he has all these different opportunities to pretty much have that vengeance and to take the righteous action of killing his uncle, right, and deposing him. But he can never decide whether he wants to do it or not. And so in the end, it just doesn't happen. I don't know, it's a literary example, but in real life, we do the same thing a lot of times. You know, we're not sure who to vote for or what position to take. We kind of keep debating back and forth, and we end up never doing anything. So reach conclusions, take actions, deliberate sometimes, of course, but not to no end, perpetually and without reaching any final outcomes. Okay, and then there were some forms of narrow-mindedness, which are like another subcategory of barriers to critical thinking, mentioned in the book. So absolutism, that is having no ability to stand up to authority and always just assuming that they're absolutely correct. Egocentrism, basically being self-centered. Egotistical, thinking that you're the center of everything and that you're better and smarter than other people. When you're egotistical, you know, you have an overinflated estimate of your own strengths and abilities, so you cannot make proper adjustments and corrections. Also, you know, it's a hard way for a person to make solid relationships in life, because people that are egotistic don't seem like they have much concern for others, and that's noticed by others, and so they're not going to give you their best. I also find that it's makes you vulnerable to manipulation through flattery, because when people know you have a big ego, they'll appeal to that, and then they can simply win concessions out of you through the use of flattery. I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking about like Trump and Kim Jong-un, right? Like Kim Jong-un was getting all kinds of concessions from the United States about the way he was developing nuclear weapons over there and doing all kinds of nuclear tests, just because he was flattering President Trump, and that undermined our safety and security, I would argue. So, you know, one example that just comes to mind off the top. Ethnocentrism, that's the unjustified belief that a person's race, group, or culture is superior to others. So like think of supremacist type of thinking. It's a terrible thing that people even take that seriously at all. It's completely unscientific. It's not based at all on human genetics or culture. So it's just hate. Nobody should have hate and dislike of other cultures, nor should anybody think that theirs is supreme and better than the rest. A human being born anywhere has the same human genome that all the others have, with minor differences that account for your phenotypical traits. So that's something that's very clear. There's no debate about that. We should relegate that way of thinking to the dustbin of history, but unfortunately it's still, the struggle goes on for full equality, so people should not think that they're superior. Anthropocentrism, that is the belief that humanity is the center of everything and is basically not as, that non-human animals and nature are not as important as that. Well, the issue with that, though, even though we are, I guess, in many ways superior to animals, think of our language, our technology, our just higher powers of thought, we should at least have some degree of respect for nature, because if we don't, then of course we'll undermine our own standing on the planet Earth, because we're a part of nature and we depend on the health of the ecosystem for our own survival. So keep that in mind as you go through life. Humans are special, yes, but we are part of nature, and we have to honor that and treat it well. Now, finally, what is rationalization? Rationalization is when you do something impulsively or without critical thought, and then later on, after the fact, you try to come up with a more reasonable sounding explanation for it. So it's kind of like trying to make something sound smart and reasonable that was done in the first place for no good reason. I had a great example from one of you guys. I don't remember who it was, but a student on the quiz was, giving their answer about rationalization. And they said, imagine a person buys an impulse like sneaker purchase, like just cool sneakers are dropping and they bought them, they're really expensive. Someone asked them later, how come you bought those? I thought that you're kind of like low on cash. Don't you need the money for more important things like rent? And the guy, you imagine he says this. So he didn't have any thought about why to buy it, he just did it on impulse. But now someone's questioning why he did it. And he's like, oh, well, because think of the resale value on these shoes, right? I mean, that's the thing. When you buy these kind of shoes, you can flip them on StockX or some kind of resale website, and you can make a big profit. So it's actually a totally smart investment. Now it sounds like the person is just making wise financial choices, but in the first place, they were just doing it off the impulse. So sometimes we act that way. We should have rational reasons in the beginning, not just covering for ourselves later with rationalization. And then double think. Doublethink is when a person has two contradictory beliefs, two beliefs that are opposite beliefs, and they have them at the same time, believing two opposite things at the same time. It's a word that comes from the novel 1984 by George Orwell, where they tried to instill doublethink in the minds of the citizens there to kind of keep them permanently confused and therefore subservient to the big brother. But, like imagine a person says, I believe in full equality, of men and women, and they are equal and should have the same rights and entitlements and privileges in society. But I also think, women should be in the kitchen doing most of the household chores because that's a woman's place. Now, if a person has these two beliefs, they're not consistent with each other. Men and women are equal, but yeah, also women should do more household work. That would be a case of doublethink, cognitive dissonance, and the person kind of needs to resolve these contradictions in their view and like drop one belief in favor of the other. Or if a person said, I think that men and women should be able to marry whoever they want and marry members of the same sex if they want, marriage equality. But I don't want my child to marry a member of the same sex. So that's, again, a case of like doublethink. It's okay for everybody, but not for someone that I know. Okay, so anyway, barriers to critical thinking. Now, chapter 3, the next part of the study guide, that's material that we've reviewed more recently. It's all about language. What's language? It's a system of communication that involves a set of symbols, which could be spoken like this, written like that, or nonverbal like sign language. Different functions of language. Language is sometimes used to inform, that's an informative function, to produce information that's true or false. Directive, that's using imperatives to direct or influence behavior. We talked about those a moment ago. Expressive language, that's language that's used to convey feelings or emotions and to bring about an emotional impact, like think of song lyrics, poetry, etc. And then there's ceremonial language, which is language that's used in official and formal settings, like wedding ceremonies, court proceedings, meetings of Congress, oaths of office, etc. We talk about different types of meanings and definitions. Denotative meaning is the meaning of a term as you would find it in the dictionary. So it's like its formal definition just expresses its essential attributes with no kind of slang emphasis added. Connotative meaning is meaning that's based on past experience and associations. And as such, it can be a little positive or negative in emphasis. Like take the word dog that we spoke about. Denotative meaning is it's a mammal species of the canine variety, but connotative meaning could be used as a slang term of friendship or camaraderie, or as a derisive term of dislike for a person. Different types of definitions. Stipulative definitions, definitions given to new terms in the language, like gigabyte or even just, I don't know, DVD or something. Then there's theoretical definitions. Those are definitions of scientific terms like force, mass, gravity, and so on. Operational definition. So what's that? That's a definition which involves the use of a boundary or threshold to create standardization. So think about how we define obesity according to the BMI metric. We don't allow people to say obesity means different things for different people. We want to have a common standard in medicine, so we associate it with a certain threshold value in the BMI number scale. Same with like driving under the influence being defined on the basis of the 0.08 threshold of blood alcohol content, or poverty being defined on the basis of how much income you have compared to the threshold set by the government at the poverty line. Okay, and there's also persuasive definitions. Those are definitions that are given to try and persuade people to agree with your view on something. So like if you said that, let's see, taxation is theft, or capitalism is theft, or meat is murder, these would be definitions that try to give a person a perspective on an issue that's the same as your own. So we should always be a little skeptical about those because oftentimes they're trying to shape our views without making appeal to argument. Now, criteria for evaluating a good definition. Good definitions should be neither too broad nor too narrow. They should not be circular. They should state all the essential attributes of the thing being defined. They should not use emotional language, nor should they use overly technical and obscure language. And you can find our notes and discussion to see further detail on those points. Different rhetorical devices, guys, okay? So we mentioned euphemism, when you replace a negative or neutral word with a more positive one to make it sound better, like calling an old house retro or classic, or a car old, retro, or classic. There's dysphemism, that's replacing positive or neutral word with a negative one to make it sound worse than it is. So for example, cigarettes become cancer sticks, or the inheritance tax becomes the death tax. Then there's hyperbole, that's exaggeration and overstatement, like I literally died when I saw the test or whatever. Then you have got sarcasm. That's the use of taunting, ridicule, or irony to make light of something or to deflect critical analysis. Like someone does something clumsy and sloppy and you're like, wow, smooth move. Sarcasm. Finally, then there's deception, which could be passive or active. Active deception is saying something false on purpose to mislead people, like saying that you never cheated on a person, but you did. Passive deception would just be holding back the truth and not revealing it so the person doesn't discover it. And that would not be telling a lie, but it would instead be omission. So there's lies of commission and lies of omission, they say. And a lie of omission would be passive deception. Okay, and then 4 communication styles, last note from chapter 3. You've got aggressive, people that just want to get their way no matter what, even if they hurt people's feelings and destroy relationships. Then you got passive, that's people who want to avoid confrontation no matter what, even if they get pushed over and walked all over. Then you have assertive, which is a good happy medium. That's saying calmly and confidently what you want or need, but knowing how to hold back when you're going too far and maybe putting harm to the relationship. And then there's passive aggressive, which is wanting to get your way like an aggressive person, but also being too passive to come right out and say things openly and honestly. So you don't say openly and honestly what you want or need, but you resort to indirect strategies of manipulation to get your way. Like speaking about the topic within earshot, but not addressing the person. Like, someone really should do the dishes, but that's all I'm going to say, and kind of being a little indirect about it. Okay, now the 4th chapter, the knowledge chapter, that's what we've most recently covered, and so I'm not going to have the ability or the time to go through all the points on it, but I wanted to speak about a few things at the end because we didn't get to cover them. So what I'm talking to you right now about are items 15, 16, 17, and 18. So let me just quickly speak about these points, which are also in the book, okay? What is a self-fulfilling prophecy? Self-fulfilling prophecy is when you expect something to happen, and because you expect it to happen, that ends up somehow causing it to happen. So it's when your expectation of an event ends up causing the event to happen. And it's usually when you have a negative expectation that's not based on evidence, which then somehow shapes your behavior towards that negative outcome. Like, for example, suppose that you get to a class and on the first day when you look at the syllabus, you're like, I just don't think this is going to be my most successful class. Looking at the content and the material, I think that I'm not going to pass this class. So if you don't expect to pass on day 1, then how will you proceed through the semester? In a class where you already don't expect to pass, will you devote your full measure of attention and energy towards it? No, because you would probably think if I'm likely to not pass, then this is a waste of effort if I try to put my all into it. So I'm going to withdraw from the study and habits that I need for success. And now because you expected to fail, you behave in a way that's consistent with the expectation and it leads to the failure. Or an athlete taking the field of competition. They expect to not do well and play well. So if they expect to lose, then they're already setting themselves up mentally to not make the extra effort, hustle, play, etc., which leads to the loss. Those are individual circumstances. It could happen in a relationship. You expect the person's going to break up with you. You think they don't like you so much. So you start to withdraw from them emotionally, and then that causes them to be upset with you, leads to the breakup that you expected on the basis of your self-fulfilled prophecy. Everyone in the society expects the bank to collapse, let's suppose. So because they expect this collapse of the banking system, they all withdraw their money from the banks. And this run on the banks ends up causing the collapse of the financial system, which was caused simply by the self-fulfilling prophecy of all the people withdrawing money. Okay, so wait until you have evidence of something bad happening before you act in a way that assumes that outcome. Because oftentimes a negative expectation and the behavior that follows from it will actually produce the scenario that you don't want. Another example, 2 nations expect war to be waged by the other against them. So if you expect the outbreak of war, you'll start to prepare defensively for it, which will then be perceived as preparations for war by your opponent, and it could lead to the outbreak of war. Okay, so that's self-fulfilling prophecy, guys. Next up, question 16, one of us versus one of them error. This is a social error, and it happens when people classify us into groups of us and them, and then treat the people who are regarded as them with less respect and concern. How many different ways can people be divided amongst each other? I mean, we're all human beings, but how many different ways can people say, hey, it's us against them, or us versus them? People can be distinguished or divided. Tell me in the chat if anyone can think of a couple of these points. Like we can just divide people along, I'll give you one example, along gender lines, us men, them women, or vice versa, us women, them men. Or we can divide people along, go ahead, what's next? I said gender is one possible way of putting people into camps of us and them. But it's not the only way. What's another possible way of people being divided? Rich and poor, so socioeconomic status. You can say us the poor, them the rich, us the wealthy, them the middle class, right? You can also do it along political affiliation. Us liberals, them conservatives, us conservatives, them liberals. Age, another one, yes. Us young people, them boomers or whatever, or vice versa. Race, certainly. Us white, them non-white, or non-white versus white, etc. Religion, Christians, non-Christians, Jews, Muslims. Exactly. So look, here's the thing. People have a natural tendency to want to associate and identify with various groups. There's just very powerful social pressures on human beings to be parts of a larger system that they belong to. And that's good. And you should, I think, have a sense of pride and reverence for the achievements and so forth of people within your own group. But the problem is when you start to use that as a basis for dehumanization and disrespect of other people. We have to have a solid dose of respect and appreciation for people of all different walks of life, faiths, political views, etc. Because we have to remember that we have a lot more in common than we have in terms of differences. And if we emphasize these differences, it tears at the fabrics and bond of society. You know, after a while, people don't want to live with each other and they don't even fully respect each other as people. So let's not indulge in one of us, one of them thinking. Respect and appreciate the value of groups that you are a part of, but let's not disparage and demean others because it's a big world and not everybody is the same and they never will be. Okay, so next up, number 17. What is the phenomenon called diffusion of responsibility and who is Kitty Genovese? So let me tell you about Kitty Genovese. This was a woman that was being murdered and attacked in an apartment building that she lived in New York in the 70s. And famously, she was crying out for help because she lived in this densely populated apartment high-rise where a lot of people were around in the adjacent rooms and buildings and units. So she's crying out, help, 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 this person's attacking me. Now, there were a lot of people there, neighbors and stuff, and they actually heard her cries and screams. But they thought that, well, you know, there's a lot of other people around. I'm not the only one. So probably someone else will intervene or call the police or something. And because that attitude was so widespread, everyone thinking someone else will do it, nobody did anything, and that led to her not receiving any aid. And of course she died. So this is a diffusion of responsibility. It's a social phenomenon when you're in a group setting. And the definition is this: in a group setting, no individual feels personally responsible to take action, and therefore no action gets taken. So sometimes we see this in other cases, like suppose I ask the students, someone give me an example of modus ponens, and we're all like in this classroom setting. Now, one student might think this, well, I'm not going to type in the answer or raise my hand because there's so many others. One of the other students will take the initiative and answer the question instead. And that same thinking is so widespread that the whole class is like looking at everyone else, like waiting for someone to take the initiative and act, and nothing does happen. Sometimes the professor then has to call on somebody or make a more, forceful request for the information. But the thing is, you have to think as an individual. Even when you're in groups, you cannot succumb to groupthink. So when there's action that needs to be taken, take the initiative and take it upon yourself to do it. Don't wait for, instruction or direction. They tell people who are trained in, first responder type emergency response that you may have to delegate authority to people sometimes and tell them what to do in the midst of a mass emergency or some type of quick emergency. Like say someone gets into cardiac arrest or having a heart attack, like in a classroom setting. Everyone's looking around like, who knows CPR? Someone's going to do something. But if somebody had their wits about them, they should say, excuse me, in this room, who knows CPR? You. You're going to perform it. You're going to call the police. You're going to run to the next building and try and get further assistance. If you direct someone and you call them out, you can kind of bring them into awareness of what they should be doing. But groupthink dominates a lot of times. That's diffusion of responsibility. Your feeling of personal responsibility gets diluted out when you're in the midst of a big group. Okay. And then the last thing is the Ash experiment. Okay. It'll just take 1 second to explain this. The Solomon Asch experiment was another social psychology experiment, so we're adding that now on top of Milgram and Zimbardo. It was to study the effects of conformity on people's judgment and perception. So they said, here, take this line and compare it to these other 3 comparison lines. Okay, now, if I was asking you the question, A, B, or C, which one matches the length of this standard line? Do you think you'd be able to tell me which one? I know we're running low on time, so as you're typing that in the chat, I hope it's clear that it's C. C matches the length of this. A is much too long and B is too short, so it's C. Now in the study they had 6 subjects and they would coach 5 of them to all give the wrong answer and say it with total confidence as though it was the most obvious thing in the world. The sixth person didn't know that the other five were previously coached by the research team. And so when they get to the sixth person, the whole study was about them. Will they give the same wrong answer that the other five people gave? Or will they go with the obvious correct answer that you can just see by looking at it with your two eyes? And what happened is that 75% of the people in the sixth subject's position said the wrong answer. So it would be like persons 1 through 5. Which line matches? B, B. Definitely B. Oh, B. Now you get to the sixth person and like, okay, well, the others are all saying B, which in my eyes, it doesn't look like it. But I must be wrong. Something must be off with my vision. Yeah, you know what? Actually, I can kind of see it. It's just like an illusion, sort of, but it is B. So 75% of people gave the wrong answer, which is contradicting the obvious evidence of their two eyes. So it just reminds you again that in social scenarios, social pressure can sometimes influence the way you judge things. It's not like these people necessarily thought, oh, I know it's C, but I'm going to say B to fit in. In many cases, later on, they said, you know what? I started to question my own vision, and it started to kind of look like it did match. So if that can happen in a test of the judgment of length of lines, imagine how much more easily it could happen in real life. Like say you're on a jury and the other 11 jurors are all voting guilty and you're saying, I don't think they proved guilt though. And I don't think he's guilty. Are you really going to stick with your judgment or are you going to say, but how can 11 other people be wrong? You know, I got to go with what everyone else is saying. So anyway, Ash experiment shows the power of conformity to shape our views. And that's the reason that it's mentioned in the book. So we're done with the whole review session. I would invite you to go back and look at some of the notes in chapter 4 if you want a little bit further summary and discussion of those, but we have all our videos online so you can use them for your study. For now though, I don't want to keep you any longer, so thanks a lot everybody. Let me know that you're good to go and just you can say goodbye or anything in the chat, and then I'll be in touch with you on Thursday. On Thursday, you'll be delivered this test at 8:30 a.m., just like the quiz that you did last couple of weeks ago. And you'll have until the 9:45 a.m. to send back your answers as an attached document. I'll send you another note through Titanium with full detailed instructions about how we'll do it on Thursday, but that's basically it. So looking forward to the meeting. Anybody who hasn't checked for their scores on previous assignments, feel free to do that. I'm answering all the emails that I get about those scores as they come in. Okay, then thanks again, everybody, and take care. I'll see you on Thursday.